Thanks for joining us on the show, diving headfirst into all things people, power, and politics. This, my friends, is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. The news never ends, and even when you put your phone on Do Not Disturb, it still feels like you're flooded with push alerts and social media posts. That's why we're here to sort through all of that mess. So buckle up, a lot to cover tonight, and here's where we're going to begin. The East Wing of the White House is coming down, along with concerns from historians. There's a lot of questions about if the Trump administration is even allowed to do this the way they're doing it and the ethics of building this new ballroom. We're diving into that with Lori Goldman from Femmes for Dems and conservative commentator Brandon Bryce. Plus, as the clock ticks down to November 4th, we're actually taking up the question of messaging. Are voters' minds actually set? What can the mayoral candidates do to change people's minds? And where does this messaging stand for both parties ahead of the midterms? A local strategist who does this for a living, Jason Rowe, is in Studio C with some insight. But the executive branch is where we begin today because President Trump says the federal government owes him money because of his past investigations into his own conduct. Now, this followed a New York Times story which says he filed administrative claims before being reelected, seeking roughly $230 million. That's over the FBI's search of Mar-a-Lago for classified documents in 2022 and a separate investigation into possible ties his 2016 campaign and Russia may have had. The president says he wouldn't pocket the money, but there's also ethical questions. You see, the attorneys who approve the claims are Trump allies and were actually involved in the classified documents case. And President Trump says, ultimately, you know what, he has the say on any payout, claiming it would have to cross his desk.
If I get money from our country, I'll do something nice with it, like give it to charity or give it to the White House.
You can't simply transfer $230 million of taxpayer funds because Donald Trump has directed his sycophants within his administration to do just that.
The DOJ wouldn't comment on Trump's claims, but says no matter what, it will follow the guidance of career ethics officials. To Capitol Hill now, where at this point, I don't think that we actually need to tell you there's still no deal to reopen the government. Something else that hasn't changed is the finger pointing going on between the two sides. But amid the blame game, a marathon. Oregon Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley seizing the Senate floor, speaking for more than 22 hours. The only pauses were for lengthy questions from other Democrats. Merkley pushed back on what he calls the president's, quote, tightening authoritarian grip on the country.
Yes, authoritarianism is here now. Let's ring the alarm bells. Are the freedoms deteriorating? Well, one freedom is to criticize the president without the power of the state coming after you. And yet the power of the state is now coming after the people on Trump's enemies list. And he's telling in public tweets his attorney general to go get them. Go get them fast. Now I want action.
As far as the shutdown goes, this week is the first full paycheck federal workers will miss. We're officially in our fourth week of the government shutdown. The last one we saw in 2018 and 2019 lasted 35 days. Turning overseas, NATO jets performed nuclear war drills today in the Netherlands. While NATO says the exercises are not linked to any world events necessarily, they come at a really critical time between the war between Russia and Ukraine. NATO's Secretary General was in Washington today for a last-minute trip to meet with President Trump about the war. Mark Rutte saying he has total confidence in President Trump in the fight to end this conflict.
I will see the president later today. We will discuss further how we from NATO can be helpful in delivering his vision of getting a full-scale peace in Ukraine, which of course we all pray for after his enormous success in Gaza.
The visit by Secretary General Rutte comes after a planned meeting between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin was canceled. The president has not agreed to supply Ukraine with those Tomahawk missiles, but he says he has not ruled it out either. And speaking of Gaza, Vice President J.D. Vance is in the Middle East trying to advance the current ceasefire there. The vice president met today with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, hoping the peace plan stays intact. Since the ceasefire started, both Israel and Hamas have accused the other side of violating that agreement. The vice president acknowledged there are challenges that lie ahead.
Very excited to sit down and work together on the Gaza peace plan. We have a very, very tough task ahead of us, which is to disarm Hamas, but rebuild Gaza to make life better for the people in Gaza, but also to ensure that Hamas is no longer a threat to our friends in Israel. That's not easy.
Now, Vice President Vance went on to say he feels very optimistic about where things currently stand. Prime Minister Netanyahu will also work with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. That'll be on Friday. That's just scratching the surface. Believe that? So let's pick up the pace and run through some of the other big stories we're following in the world of politics. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announcing the military launched its 8th strike on a vessel accused of carrying drugs. This one was in the Pacific Ocean. 2 people were killed in this latest attack, bringing the death toll to at least 34. Hegseth drew some comparisons between drug cartels and al-Qaeda, claiming they're waging war on Americans, adding, quote, "There will be no refuge or forgiveness, only justice." President Trump has said the U.S. is in armed conflict with drug cartels, which is upsetting congressional leaders on both sides of the aisle. As you know, only Congress has the power to declare war. To the White House, where a man is in custody after driving his car into a security barrier on the outside. This happened a little after 10:30 last night. Secret Service agents searched his car and says it was safe. The man was taken to the hospital for a mental health evaluation. He's expected to face charges of unlawful entry and destruction of government property. And roughly 2,100 USDA county offices are reopening across the country. That's despite the government shutdowns. The goal is to actually help farmers and ranchers access $3 billion of aid from existing programs. The agency says each office will have 2 workers. They'll be paid even though the government is still shut down. Now, thousands of other workers, including air traffic controllers, are going without pay. So be nice to those TSA agents when you fly out. Practice your patience, as they say, right? We're about to see Major League Baseball's World Series airing right here on Fox 2. And guess what? Next week, these 2 candidates for Detroit Mayor, City Council President Mary Sheffield, and Triumph Church Senior Pastor Solomon Kinlock Jr. will be the pregame for one of the big games that the whole country, the whole city will be watching. It's a forum right here on The Pulse. It airs Monday at 6:30 and re-airs after Fox's World Series coverage that night. And since this is the show that puts you first, we're taking your questions right to the candidates. All you have to do is email thepulse@fox.com or just scan the QR code on your screen there to auto-launch the email app on your phone. We prefer you record the question on video so you can doll up, get that Instagram filter going. I'm kidding. Get your name out there. We want to see your face. Before you ask the question, say your first name, and then, you know what, we'll put you on TV. We'll also accept text-only questions as well if you prefer to be a little more private. You have until 7 o'clock Friday night to get yours in. I have no Instagram filter. I don't think. Up next, part of the White House meets the wrecking ball. Crews ripped down part of the East Wing to make room for President Trump's new ballroom. We're diving into that next with Lori Goldman and Brandon Bryce. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. Good to be with you. Here to talk about the latest involving the demolition and remodeling at the White House, Lori Goldman with Femmes for Dems, and via Zoom, Brandon Bryce, a conservative commentator and host of the Bryce is Right podcast. It's good to see you both. Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse. Good to see you.
Thank you for having us.
All right, Lori, we'll begin with you. So the East Wing right now, the entire East Wing, as we speak, is being demolished as they get ready to kind of refurbish that whole thing. But initially, the president said you won't have to touch the East Wing because this ballroom will be separate. But now we're understanding it's going to be a pretty big complex that involved pieces and parts of the East Wing needing to be refurbished. What are your thoughts on this $200 million project?
Well, I'm surprised. It's like the president is performing a late-term abortion on the East Wing, and I thought he was against that. It is a travesty. It's an atrocity. I've heard, I've read, I've talked to people in the know. I don't think he pulled the permits, got the permissions on a historic building that you and I would have to obtain. And he says it's $200 million and it's not going to cost taxpayers anything. It's going to be more than $200 million. And he has donors that came in for a dinner that we already paid for to solicit donations, and it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Because those people like Google and the rest that are going ahead and making donations, What do they care about a ballroom on the White House?
All right, Brandon, Bryce, bring you into the fold here. Question for you. You know, you're hearing a lot about this happening. I just want to ask you a very simple question. If Barack Obama, back when he was president, decided to wreck the East Wing and build a ballroom that was gaudy, would Republicans have any patience at all with that? Would they just be losing their minds?
Well, since you put it like that, Roop, I mean, probably not. But this is not the first time we've seen changes to the White House. I mean, even if you go back to the 60s, under Jacqueline Kennedy, you know, she changed many rooms in the White House, and people said, oh, it's horrible. Here's the reality. The American taxpayer is not paying for it. And the reality is, not only is I think this is a good thing, but now from a security standpoint, it's an expansion of the White House. You know, should the president have consulted in the committee, the preservation committee? Absolutely. But the reality is, if the taxpayers are not paying for it, and if he's saying he's paying for it out of his own money, why are we worried about it? We have so many.
What about the donors?
Like a shutdown that we need to be focused on.
What about the donors, though? As Lori pointed out, some of these donors are some pretty big tech companies and other people out there who may have their hands in the pocket. Doesn't that hurt the integrity of the whole process?
But Roop, this is Washington, and am I saying that that's necessarily a good thing? I mean, this is politics. You know, when we look at Biden's donors and Obama's donors, nobody asked that question. And so I go back to, if the taxpayers are not paying for it, and if it's something that will benefit not only his presidency, but other presidencies to come, that is including Democrats, why are we making such a big deal out of this issue when we've seen this before?
Lori, 1948 to 1952, at the time, President Truman said, we need to overhaul this. It's not safe. We got to make a steel structure. They redid much of the White House and made it into a steel structure. I believe it was President Roosevelt years before that decided that it was important to do these renos. Why does this feel different? And is it just being unfair to President Trump?
No, it's not being unfair. He has gouged the people's house. He has gouged it out. These other changes, which the gentleman mentioned, were primarily inside rooms of the White House, modernization, et cetera. You know, perfecting the structure to be safer, big deal. What he has done is taken bulldozers and taken off a large portion of the East Wing, which, do you know what the East Wing houses? It houses the First Lady's offices and things like that. She had to move out, in fact, during this. Of course, because God forbid we should displace a man. So it is crazy, and we are not paying for it, but we are paying for it indirectly from the favors that will accrue from these billionaires that are paying favor to the president to get this done. And anybody that doesn't see that, please go bang your head against a wall.
Well, Brandon, before you bang your head against the wall, if you don't see it, I want to ask you a question. National Capital Planning Commission basically said, hey, here's the deal. They're concerned that the integrity of the look of the White House, the way that conventionally looks to everybody, will be permanently disrupted because of this design. Do you worry about that at all, that it just looks too gaudy and this is just the president putting some Trumpian style on his presidency?
You know, Rube, every president comes in with their style of what they want to do. Is it something I would have personally done? Maybe, maybe not. But here's the reality. There are many other issues like the shutdown that we should be talking about, not something that the taxpayers, again, are not going to pay or feel. I also say this, you know, when we, again, to your colleague, the name of the deal in Washington is you don't get elected. And so I say that, so I say that because, you know, this is how Washington works. You know, when you talk about the system that's broken, this is how it works for Democrats and Republicans.
Let's hope that the ballroom Wi-Fi is better than the one that you got at your house, my man. With $200 million, they can afford that, right? Question about the shutdown, because you are talking about that. I want to talk to both of you about that. Your concerns right now, if you could honestly, Brandon and Lori, tell your own side, so to speak, something that they could do differently right now, what would it be? Brandon, we'll begin with you. Should the president take a meeting with the Democrats?
I think the president should, from the perspective that if you look at the history of shutdowns, who's in power is the person that gets blamed. Now, my concern is this is Schumer's fault all day when you look at holding up a bill and pushing things that do not support the American people. However, perception is everything. And if you look at history, whoever is in charge gets blamed.
All right. So, Lori, my question to you then is, standalone bills have been introduced time and time again. Democrats keep voting it down. Why not have a standalone bill that pays for these military members, the TSA, the air traffic control, get these people paid, and then we can talk about health care. Your thoughts on that? Yeah,
you think that anyone's going to talk to us about health care if we do any of those things?
You think a standalone bill would prohibit any talk about health care?
Absolutely. FDA, I just saw in your segment, FDA is opening their offices so they can give farmers their subsidies, right?
Well, USDA is, yeah.
USDA.
Yeah.
The air traffic controllers aren't getting money. Other people aren't getting money. So I guess whichever voting bloc you belong to is who he listens to.
But shouldn't we be a little embarrassed as Democrats and Republicans in this country that this is where we're at? I mean, is anyone turning around and saying, I'm so proud to be a Democrat, I'm so proud to be a Republican? The whole world is watching as the government is shut down now on day 22.
Republicans never, ever give in. We always do. This is the time I say to my Democratic sisters and brothers, stay strong, don't give in, it won't get you anything.
Brandon Bryce, proud moment in America?
No, because the reality is, whether it's the Democrats or Schumer's fault, or whoever's fault it is, the American people are the ones who are suffering. We're already at 32 days, or excuse me, we're at 4 weeks.
22 days, yeah.
I'm sorry. Two to 3 weeks of a shutdown. The last time we saw a shutdown like this went 32 days. And my concern is that this doesn't go into the holiday. Let's be honest. You've got Thanksgiving coming up. You've got Christmas coming up. This is going to hurt many Americans. And at the end of the day, those who are hurting are not in Washington. They're in Main Street.
Be nice to the TSA agents. I was at the airport last week and saw a little bit of impatience and just shook my head thinking these are guys and gals who are working, forget blue or red. They're just good people trying to get their job done. Well, Brandon Bryce, good to see you. Lori Goldman, always great to see you as well. Thank you both for your time here on The Pulse. We're less than 2 weeks out from the mayoral race and the big questions candidates face. Are voters' minds actually set, or can we still sway people before the polls close? That's a question candidates may be asking. Jason Rowe is here to talk about that next. This is The Pulse on Fox 2. It is people, power, and politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show, The Pulse. Here to talk about the run-up to Election Day is Jason Cable Rowe. He's a Republican strategist, but he's run multiple campaigns and is here to talk about that last stretch from a nonpartisan perspective because he's just so good at this stuff. And I find it interesting, Jason, because you've been on the show and you've been able to kind of debate talking points of different things. But really what your bread and butter has been, you're a strategist. Sure. I just watched this Detroit mayoral race, and I do have to ask on behalf of all of our viewers in the suburbs, why do you think a race like this should matter to all of us in Michigan, a Detroit race?
Well, I think, look at the 12 years of Mike Duggan's tenure, where the city was, the bankruptcy that was navigated. It's really important in your chief executive, far more important than an individual council member that's leading the city, that they be competent and prepared to tackle the challenges. And we have a lot of challenges. As I said, I think on balance, you got to look at the Duggan years and say the city is better off after 12 years. But there are a lot of pending problems that he's leaving right at the right time. Over the last decade, the general fund has been flat at $1.5 billion. There's no more Biden bucks. Police and fire contracts, and they had to take a haircut during the bankruptcy. Police and fire contracts are up. They're going to want a minimum of 3% increase. Sure. Where do you get those new dollars? And what's going to happen ultimately is, I think, the mayor will be Mary Sheffield, there's probably going to be discussion of some form of tax increase. I don't think that can be a tax increase on the individual taxpayers of the city. I just don't think. Right. You could very well see it be a tax on businesses, and that might create short-term revenue increases, but long-term you're going to be shrinking the tax base, and you're going to have just problems that you're kicking the can on. So the next mayor's got a big challenge ahead of her.
If you're Pastor Kinloch right now at this hour of this election, I had a chance to moderate a forum at the Chaldean Chamber of Commerce just last week, and I interviewed both of them on stage. And I had 3 or 4 people come up to me in the audience who said, wow, he made me think a little bit about whether or not I'm going to vote for him, because he is that kind of dark horse candidate coming out of the night to say, hey, you know what, if you don't like what you're seeing here, I'm an alternative. Does that work, and how does that strategy work for someone like Kinloch?
Well, it certainly can work. You know, the reality is, so a few people did see you at the Chaldean Chamber event and got some exposure to Pastor Kinloch. That's about the most anybody's getting. I'm getting very little exposure. You turn on the TV, you know, on internet ads. If you live in the city, you're getting mail. You're seeing Mary Sheffield. She is everywhere. I think she, of all the candidates throughout the primary and into the general election 2 weeks from tonight, she's run the best campaign. She's had the highest visibility. She's had the most endorsements.
But talking to disenfranchised voters, who do you think is
but the disenfranchised voters, there's not very many of them based on the polling that came out this week from the Glengarriff group that shows that 76% of Detroiters think the city is on the right track. Mary Sheffield is at, I think, 68% approval rating and only 8% disapproval. So there's not a lot of people. I mean, there are certainly problems, and I know in the neighborhoods there's a lot of complaints that a lot of the investment in Detroit is going into, you know, the Woodward corridor around the stadiums and the nightlife, but not the neighborhoods.
But Mayor Mike Duggan has sat in the exact chair that you're in and has literally interrupted me and said, that's just not true. Look at the city services. Look at the police that have
It's a perception thing, and it's in all big cies. So
it is.
I do think it's something.
But the streetlights are back on. The blight remediation has been incredible, whether or not you like the way they got there or not.
Sure.
The housing's a little bit more available to a lot of people out there, and there's more opportunity for black businesses in the city of Detroit. Does that stuff help Mary Sheffield because she's a council person? I
think because she is the president of the city council, she aligned herself very closely with Mayor Duggan, and Mayor Duggan endorsed her. So, I mean, in the polling that came out today, she's up 50 points. Yeah. And so if I were Pastor Kinloch, you know, he's got a very large congregation. He better make sure voters turn out, because even though Mary's numbers are very, very strong, the reality is this is going to be an incredibly low turnout. It could be under 20%. And so then that's somewhere where Kinloch can close that gap.
He has 35,000 members of his megachurch. Yeah. So if you can activate them the next few Sundays.
Get those folks to turn out, you can close that gap.
So I find this interesting because I think the way you laid it out at the beginning was really telling, and it's important, and I like the way you did it. Look, we had all this ARPA money, which was the Biden-era money kind of helping with the federal funds. That dries out. You're handed this legacy city with problems with Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan. It's like you're setting up yourself for failure almost. I mean, it's very hard to move forward from this point on without those federal dollars trying to work with the Trump administration if you're a Democrat, wouldn't you say?
Listen, I think just as Gretchen Whitmer, who was a big critic of President Trump and vice versa, she found a way to work with him to get some things done. You know, for whatever anybody thinks of Donald Trump, you know, if you genuflect to him, he tends to look past whatever disagreements to try to get something done. I think that the Trump administration would take a great deal of pride in being a partner with the city of Detroit. I think that President Trump has a great deal of pride for how he's improved his numbers in the elections in Detroit, but also the growth and support that he has in the black community, which has also helped Republicans in the black community.
And Detroit has remained off the list of cities that he has personally said, hey, we should send National Guard troops to for a good reason, because of that relationship with Whitmer and Duggan. So it's an interesting race, and one that does affect all of us, and one that we all have to pay attention to. We know you will. You'll join us on election night as well, right?
Yes, sir. Looking forward to it.
Jason Cable Row. Good stuff. Thanks for joining us. That is the Pulse for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Roop Raj. As always, it was great to be with you.